And our rules are still the same. When dividing two positives or two negatives, the answer is positive. And at one of each, your answer is negative. Now, decimals, as much as many of you say are easier than fractions, they're really not. Although when you have problems like we're going to deal with today, they will seem easier, which is okay. So I look here and I see my first problem. My first problem reads that I am going to take negative 3.6 divided by 0.6. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to think of this in terms of if I had just 36 divided by 6, which I know is 6. Then I look at this is kind of a nice trick, just like when you were multiplying. If you do traditional long multiplication with decimals, when you get to the end, you count up how many decimal places to the right of the decimal were in the first value and are in the second value, and you add those two up to get the total number of decimal places that are in your answer. It works similarly when you're talking about division, except it works the opposite. You count up how many decimals, in this case 1 in the first and 1 in the second, that you have, and you subtract them. If you get 0, like we have here, then that means that the number you got when you divided them as if they were whole numbers is your answer. If you get, so let me make some notes here so you can get this down. So when placing the decimal, I abbreviated placing, I apologize. You subtract. If the difference is 0, you leave it. If you get a positive number, that's the number of decimal places. And if you get a negative number, that means how many you're short, so that tells you the number of zeros to add. Now I know this sounds confusing, but once you get the hang of it, it actually is pretty self-explanatory. So let's look at the next one. We have 25 divided by 0.05. If I take 25 divided by 5, I get 5. Now, when I'm talking about the decimal places, 25 has 0. 0.05 has 2, which means that I get an answer of -2 when I subtract, which means I am short 2. So that means that I have an answer of 500. And if I think about it, if I have $25 and I am dividing out groups of a nickel, I get 20 nickels in the first dollar. But then I have 24 more dollars of 20 nickels each to go, which is why I get such a large number. Moving on to the third problem. Here, I'm going to treat this as if it were 28 divided by 7, which is 4. And when I go ahead and check out where I place my decimal, this one has 2, and this one has 1. And when I take 2 minus 1, I get 1, which means I need 1 decimal place in my answer. I also need to make sure I recognize that this is negative because this one is negative and this one's positive. And so I get 0 0.4, and the answer is negative. Now moving on to the word problem. We have a pet store. Has 2.1 meters of space for hamster cages, which are 0.3 meters long each. How many can fit on the shelf? Now, if I think about this, if my shelf is 2.1 meters, one cage is 0.3 meters. I'm dividing this by this. So therefore, that means that my math problem I'm going to do is 2.1 divided by 0.3. So I'm going to treat this like 21 divided by 3, which is 7. And then if I'm counting decimal places, this one has 1, this one has 1, 1 minus 1 is 0. Therefore, 7 is my solution, but I need 7 cages because it's a word problem, so I need a label on my answer. Now this was a very short lesson today. Your next job is to finish up by completing the U-Try problems. Don't forget to fill out your form and bring your questions with you to class tomorrow.